Hi everyone, so welcome back to my channel. So I'm the Jody Saver, and today I've got my second episode of my podcast series, which is called Let's Chat About Money. And I've got a special guest today. So we've got Chaz from the Risk On Investor who's joining me. We're going to have a chat about all things money. There's not a limit on how long we've got for this, so I don't know how long it'll take. It might be 20 minutes, it might be 30 minutes, or it might be an hour. We'll see how we go. So I've got a few questions to ask Chaz, and there'll be some room at the end if he wants to bring up any money topics. But before we get started, I just want to flag, as always, that I'm not a financial advisor, and neither is Chaz. So anything we talk about shouldn't be classed as financial advice. It's just our own personal opinions. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Chaz if you want to give a little intro to yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much, Geordie Saver. Thanks very much for having me on the podcast as well. Looking forward to this chat. I'm honoured to be guest number 2 as well, being the guinea pigs, as it were. So for those of you who haven't sort of come across my YouTube channel or any of my stuff before, I go by the name of the Risk On Investor on that. My name day to day is Chaz. That's about it, really. I'm sure we'll dive into a lot of detail as we go through. Looking forward to the chat. And yeah.
And so you set up your YouTube channel, I think maybe November time. Is that right?
Yeah, it was about mid-November, I think it was. So
yeah, and I think
for a month and a bit now.
Yeah, and I think what really intrigued me about your journey or what you're setting out to do is this whole goal of building up a £1 million portfolio. And I just wonder, maybe if we start there and see what inspired you to set out that goal.
Yeah, it sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it, when you kind of see a massive number like that, especially when it's just coming from some random person on YouTube that you've never seen before. It's quite a long backstory, so maybe the kind of higher level of it is just, I think, having a big investment portfolio behind you gives you freedom. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave your job or anything like that, but it means you can spend your time doing whatever you want to do. And that's really the why I'm trying to build up this portfolio, because it just means, if I want to take a break, I can take a break. If I want to continue working, I can do that. But it doesn't mean that I've just got that money behind me. It just gives me that freedom to pick and choose what I'm doing, really. So I mean, a million was a fairly arbitrary goal as well. When I set it out, that sounded like a lovely big number. But yeah, that's really the background for it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, because that resonates a lot with me, and that's my reason for being interested in investing in personal finance. It's that idea that you've got the freedom, job wise, or in your personal life, to do what you want, because you've got that safety net, if you want to call it that, behind you. And I think £1 million, I mean, I can imagine that in 20 years time someone might listen to something like this saying, £1 million and I'll be able to have financial freedom. They'll be thinking, oh no, £1 million won't get you much in 20 years time. But for the moment, in 2024, I think £1 million seems to be a reasonable kind of pot of money to ease you along.
It does depend on your lifestyle as well, doesn't it? Because I think £1 million, I don't know how familiar you are with some of the first thing that really got me interested in it was the FIRE community. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. So for those of you who haven't heard, it's this kind of acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. I maybe think it's a little bit extreme in a lot of its manifestations, but the concept is that you can build a portfolio, and if you've got a good balance of stocks and bonds, you can withdraw about 4% a year over 30 years. You're pretty unlikely to run out of money. And so that £1 million, theoretically, if I use that rule of thumb, is £40,000 a year as income, which is a decent income. That's above UK median incomes at the moment. So it would be, a really great situation to be in.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about that is, like, that £40,000 is your actual tax. Like, that's a tax. If you put it in an ISA, that would be the actual take home element of it, wouldn't it? So, and to achieve that, with a day job, when you've got taxes to take into account, it'll probably put you at sort of a, I don't know, £60,000, like 55 to £60,000 income. Yeah. Yeah, really interested. And when did you start investing?
Oh, there's a bit of a backstory to this. So I've always been interested in probably more business than investing. So literally when I was at high school, I used to buy and sell sweets in the playground. I was that kid. But probably what really got me interested was like websites and web building. So back when I was, God, I don't know how old I was, 13, 14 maybe, I started trying to build websites about a game that I was really enjoying playing.
All right.
So there's a couple of games, they're like 20 years old now, but they're still like my favorite games in terms of computer games to play. One's called Stronghold and one's the sequel called Stronghold Crusader. They're like early 2000s
Right.
2D castle building games. And a sequel one came out, I don't know, it must have been 2012, 2013, something like that, called Stronghold Legends. And I played it, it was okay, but I don't quite know where it clicked, but I decided I was going to build a website about the game, sort of showing things that I'd learned playing the game and stuff like this. Stuck a few like Google AdSense ads on it. Miraculously made about £5 in AdSense adverts.
Wow.
My dad had to sign up for the account because I wasn't 18 and all this kind of stuff. And then I guess there was a bit of a lull. Fast forward a bit, maybe to uni times. I had quite a lot of free time on my hands outside of uni work because, again, I was that guy. You'd get an assignment, I'd do it like that first week after we've got it, while everyone else would leave it to the last week. So I'd quite often have all my holidays I had clear of doing coursework and things like that because I was quite organised about things like that. But I lived with a chap in my final year at uni. So this is 2017 probably. And he was quite interested in sort of finance and investing. And he probably stoked the flames within me doing that. So I dabbled a little bit in Forex trading, which was fun. I actually was profitable, which was a miracle, I think, looking back. I'd say, if anyone's interested in that, do your homework, do it on a virtual account before you try it. But for some reason, I just had confidence to try it with some real money straight away, and probably blind luck was profitable in it. And then I probably struck a big lucky break. And this is what really triggered my interest in investing. Was around that time, so this is 2017-ish, there was like a massive boom in cryptocurrencies. And again, just as an engineering student, I was quite interested in like tech and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People started chatting about it. I started doing a bit of reading and research and sort of buried myself in some of the background reading and research. A couple of projects that I got really interested in. The Coinbase app, the Kraken wallet, all on my phone. And it got to the point where in that year, everything just like parabolically went up massively in price. And so I was holding a little bit of like Ethereum and Bitcoin at that time. I could literally sit in lectures at uni. I'd refresh like the Coinbase app on my phone and it would be going up like every time I refreshed it. So that sort of mania was really exciting, I guess, as a start to investment journeys.
Yeah.
It's been a lot less exciting since then. But I know, blind luck again, I managed to sell out within a week of the top, I think, which was, again, pure luck because I just happened to get to a point where I was Googling, like, what's the UK capital gains tax allowance? And I was getting near that number and I was like, right, let's sell out before I breach that so I don't have to deal with tax.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And then so I started my job after that. I was straight out of uni, engineering, worked as a civil engineer, although it was more sort of structural engineering that I did at the time. So I was working for an international company. Particularly, I was doing bridges for highways and rail, that kind of side of things. So quite sort of number heavy and things like that. And I had quite a lot of free money at the end of the month because I was basically living like a hermit when I first started my job. I moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone in the new city. I was renting like a room in the cheapest place I could find, and it was £275 a month or something for this room. So I had about £500 a month spare. I just started reading and researching, and that's when I stumbled across this sort of fire community that we spoke about before. So I just started tucking away 500 quid a month, sort of just in a Vanguard FTSE Global All Cap fund. Built up just a few £1,000s over the year. Discovered lifetime ISAs. Thought, great, 25% bonus from the government. Chuck some money in that. And it's just kind of spiraled from there, really. Since then, it's been 5 or 6 years now. Since that point, I've just sort of continued reading, researching. I think some of the investments that I make are certainly more risky than I would suggest other people make. And maybe we can chat about that a bit later as well. But that's basically when I started the YouTube channel, where the name came from, because I'm aware that my risk tolerance is probably a lot higher than some other people are willing to take.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And there's a lot. I mean, that was a great answer. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, the first thing you mentioned about being always interested in business and starting a website, and actually there's sort of a few clues to that on your YouTube. And I think I mentioned to you in terms of the prep for this this interview was just about, have you done editing before and so on? Because actually I went on your website and it's so professionally done. It looks really great and professional. I'm like, wow, this is really good for someone who's just like, when I look at other people's who are like, new YouTubers like me, so to speak, it's all looks quite amateurish, but yours looks really professional. I was thinking, oh, you must have a background in website design or editing. I mean, have you done any of the editing before, like video wise, or is this new for you?
I've done a bit, not for a long while. So when I was a kid, sort of 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, probably that kind of age range, I got really into stop motion animation.
Right.
There are some videos on YouTube from like 15 years ago that I posted under a different channel name that I'm probably never going to reveal to anyone because they're horrendous looking back at them. But so I have dabbled before, but I've not done it professionally or anything like that. So yeah.
And I think the other thing that you mentioned that resonated, and I think it's probably true, I guess, from what I read and what I watch on YouTube, a lot of the people who are, in the personal finance community who are interested in FIRE, they all have a similar sort of lifestyle in the sense that, maybe earning above average income. When you start earning that money, instead of thinking, what expensive things can I buy, you think, actually, I've got this extra bit of money. How can I make it work for me? How can I sort of live as inexpensive as possible and start this sort of money making vehicle, if you want to call it that? So, I mean, for me, definitely, I had a similar sort of experience. I mean, I was very lucky that when I got my first job out of university, I could go back and live with my parents. And that was like, I was paying, I mean, we called it board. It's like rent, but it's like I used to pay £200 a month to my parents, and that would get me, all my bills, all my bills, all my food. Like, it was so cheap. And I had some friends who weren't in that position because they maybe were living in a city, away from their childhood home. They couldn't live with the parents, and they were then renting and maybe having to fork out £800 a month for their renting bills, compared to me who was paying 200. So I had that extra £600, and I was like, wow, how can I use that money? And for me, I hadn't really thought about investing as such. It was more, I want to get on the property ladder, so I'm going to squirrel all this money away to build a deposit for a house. But I think back to that, if I hadn't had that mindset, or if I had sort of thought, oh, I don't want to live at home with my parents, I want to rent and be an adult from day one, it would have probably taken us a couple more years to build up that deposit. So that was interesting.
I think house deposits is one of those things, isn't it, where there really is that kind of north-south geographical divide in the country. So I won't sort of give too much away, but I do live in the more sort of expensive parts of the country. It's not really high expense. It's not like London, for example. But there are just so many people that I know that just physically can't get a foot on the property ladder because they can't raise a deposit. And even once they've raised a deposit, 4.5x multiple on your income as a single person, you just can't buy a
Yeah.
house for that price. So you need to be buying with someone else effectively. And again, I was really lucky from that point of view because that crypto, like 12.5 grand that I made, was like the first chunk of my deposit. I was able to fill my lifetime ISA for 2 or 3 years in a row. I filled my girlfriend's 1 year. Unfortunately, she became my wife, so that was quite a nice sort of mix of money, and we could combine together. So I think I was quite lucky from that point of view that I had that big leg up. Like basically, like a 10 grand windfall is,
Yeah.
that early in life is just a great stepping stone. But so many people just won't have that, or aren't in a position where at the bank of mum and dad could help out with a deposit or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that, there's not many things, I guess, that being from the north, you can say is, puts you in a privileged position, but actually housing, the north is a really nice place to live. I live in Newcastle, and the house prices are significantly less than they are down south. So actually still living in the north, you can put a 10% house deposit for a nice flat or house is, it's, you have to save 10 to 20,000 pound, which actually isn't out of the realms of possibility for a lot of people. And even if you're maybe a single person and you're only a one income household, that's still within grasp. But from what I see from house prices down south, you're talking probably of a 40,000 pound deposit maybe as a minimum, and that's obviously a lot more years of saving, and yeah, probably puts it out of the realms of grasp for people who only have one income. Yeah.
I think if I could start again from scratch, knowing what I know now, I probably would have stayed in the northeast because
Mm.
I went to university in Durham.
All
Really
right.
love Newcastle as
Yeah.
well. I think it's a really nice city. If anyone's never been, well worth a trip. I think the countryside around there is really nice. Probably now the infamous Barnard Castle from Dominic Cummings is quite a nice day trip out. I think there was Finchdale Priory, High Force, Low Force
Mm.
waterfalls, that kind of stuff. It's a really nice part of the country to live in, and it is just like so much cheaper. So I've got a friend who graduated same year as me. He stayed in Durham, and he basically straight out of uni bought a 3-bed semi-detached house
Mm.
just on his graduate salary basically, and some savings that he had. And basically no one else I know was in a position to do that because we all moved south, sort of gravitated towards
Yeah.
London where there was more graduate jobs and things like that. But I think it's a really nice quality of life up there because the kind of essentials in terms of housing is cheaper. So if you can still get a decent salary, you have so much more disposable income on hand that you can live a really nice quality of life.
Yeah. And I think one of the, if there is any benefits of the pandemic, I mean, one of them could be classed as the opportunities for remote working now. So I think before pandemic, especially where I work, working from home really wasn't a done thing. Whereas, most companies now, but depending on what job you do, but office-based jobs, there's flexibility there where you can work from home. So it means that those opportunities to move somewhere else in the country whilst having the same job are now more possible than they were before. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah. So, I mean, I think what I'd like to move on to now is, and you touched on it before, is your tolerance to risk. So this is something that I see is we're quite similar from what I see on the videos in a lot of ways about, approaches to money. But I guess in terms of what we invest in, the risk element is probably where we differ a bit. So I'm quite focused on um, index funds and um, mortgage overpayments and premium bonds and those sort of. I mean, I know index funds are not exactly risk free. Obviously, there is risk inherently there, but there is a
No,
long back series of how stock market has performed. You can, what what funds you're invested in, and there's a lot of research and there's a lot of people who are investing in that area, and it's a regulated industry, I guess. And then mortgage overpayments again. There is a opportunity cost there in terms of overpaying your mortgage because you could have done something else with that money, but you're not going to lose money on that mortgage overpayment because you're saving money on the interest that you would have accrued. But you, for example, from what I see, you mentioned before, you're interested in those high yield investment types, so things like cryptocurrency and other things. So yeah, do you want to have maybe a bit of a talk about what you invest in and your risk tolerance and where that comes from?
Yeah, basically. I don't know where it comes from is the short answer. I think inherently I take the point of view that I'm young enough that I can recover from not disasters, but near disaster type events. I've always had sort of enough of that self-belief that I'd back myself to do anything. So whether it's in the workplace, if there's something I don't know how to do, I'll be the one to put my hand up and go, I'll have a crack at that. And there's a really interesting concept that it's worth a read if you've not heard anything about it before, called life cycle investing. The long and short of it is basically these kind of professors got down and they wrote a book. I think there might be some podcasts around it as well. But the long and short of it is that they encourage you to take leverage if you're young and then deleverage as you get older. The idea being that when you're young, you have time but not money. And so you can recover from, if we took the stock market as an example, in the 2008 sort of crash, stock markets, took a 50% haircut sort of across the board. If you're just about to retire, that's devastating. If you're, 20, 30 years old, a 50% dip is like the buying opportunity of a lifetime. And so that's when you should be leveraging up as much as you can. And so that's generally the overarching philosophy that I have, is that I would rather take the risk now. If it doesn't work, hey ho, I've got the rest of my career to try and recover from that. If it does work out, like that effective 10K crypto windfall I got, it can really be a helpful leg up in life. I joke with my friends I'm still mid-20s. I'm not. I'm a bit older than that now. But so for now, there's 30 or 40 years till I'm looking at a retirement sort of age. So that's plenty of time for me. Even if you look at the stock market historically, every sort of 10 years, roughly, you're looking at a doubling. So 30 years time, if I put £1 in now, double that to 2, double that to 4, double it to 8. Every pound I can put in now is worth £8 in 30 years time. Whereas if I only put that in 10 years before retirement, it's only worth £2 at retirement. So if I can double my exposure to the stock market now, it's much bigger returns, not just in terms of leveraging my current returns, but leveraging all my future returns going out. So maybe a kind of another way of looking at it is when I started my career in engineering, one of the bits of advice one of my colleagues gave me was aggressively pursue promotions at the beginning of your career. The idea being that if you can get to 35, 40 plus salary early in your career, even if you only get sort of inflation pay rises after that, you're going to earn so much more over the course of your career than if you get those promotions later in your career.
Yeah.
So it's the same concept, but I'm just applying it to investing basically. So yeah, in terms of what I invest in, the core of my funds generally over my career will be index funds. That's what it will be. But at the moment, that's just not what I'm invested in pretty much. So I do have a couple of £1,000 in a workplace pension that's just invested in an all cap like global fund basically. But about 98% of my invested net worth is in much more high risk type things. So I actually put out a video the other day about a leverage 60-40 index fund. Well, I say index fund. It seeks to mimic the risk return profile of a 60-40 stocks bond portfolio, which is my benchmark for risk basically, because that's quite a smooth, gentle rise up type portfolio. If you can leverage that, Well, to me, that feels like a no-brainer if you can get it at the leverage cheap, because you have lower drawdowns on a 60/40 portfolio. So if I
Yeah.
leverage it up to match whatever the drawdowns would have been for a 100% stock portfolio, then I can actually outperform an index if I can get the leverage cheap enough. So that's one way that I look at it. And so that will be a core part of my portfolio through my life, I think. But just every now and again, I'll see opportunities that I think that's too good to miss, and I'll just kind of go all in. So at the moment, probably the key one for me is I'm pretty heavily in Bitcoin proxies. So if people have seen my channel, I think the next 12, 18 months is going to be really good for crypto as a whole, for just a number of reasons. So, I mean, this year coming, by the time this video is out, we might know about the first one, which is potentially a Bitcoin spot ETF coming out in the US, which is just like potentially a pipeline for money to come into crypto from Wall Street. So there's like billions that could flow into crypto from that. It's a halving year, so the distribution of Bitcoin this year will halve. The US accounting rules are changing this year. So if you hold Bitcoin on a balance sheet as a company, you can effectively write that as value down on your accounting practices. So there's all these just kind of this perfect storm of things that are starting to appear that for me, I'm like, yes, that looks great. I'm going to take the risk.
Yeah.
You know, it might triple in value or I might take a 50% haircut, but I'll take that. I'll take that risk 9 times out of 10 at this stage in my investing career.
Mm. Yeah, and actually, just on that, because I was reminded when you were talking through that there that you have a weekly newsletter, don't you? That I'm signed up to, and you go into all these sort of news stories in a bit more detail. You do sort of roundups about what's going on in terms of the finance space with that extra bit detail that I guess you don't go into as much in kind of short YouTube videos. Yeah, it's really interesting that, and I just want to touch on what you said about leveraging risk and applying that to personal finance, but also professional life early on in your career, and you being someone who takes risks in that sense and how that can benefit. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. You know, you mentioned about you starting businesses when you were younger. You know, website building, selling sweets in the yard, things like that. But that's all risk, isn't it? That's doing something that separates you from the norm. You know, because that's not the experience of every single person in school, or you know, not everyone on the street has built a website and made Google AdSense. And I guess it's like when, you know, I like Dragon's Den, for example. I religiously watch it. I love the entrepreneurial aspect. I mean, this channel is the first sort of entrepreneurial thing I've done in my life, and actually what I enjoy about it, even if it doesn't make any money, it's that thing of doing something as a creative outlet and seeing your progression over time and things like that. And I guess those people, when I watch Dragon's Den and I see the investors on there, they're there because they took risks at some point in their life. Like, none of them are there because they saw an opportunity and they didn't take it. Like, the whole point is they've sort of made it that far because they have taken a risk, and some of them are taking that risk really early on in life. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Dragons on Dragon's Den, but Sarah Davies is from the Northeast, and she created this. I'll call it like a craft invention, but she did business. She did a business degree at university, and then she created that. It was like an envelope maker, basically, and she created that when she was 21, 22, and she sort of took a punt on herself and thought, actually, I'm going to sell this on QVC and shopping channels, and you know, obviously that all escalated, and now looking at her, she's very successful on Dragon's Den. You look and you think, oh, it must be nice, you know. You sometimes go into that thing of thinking, oh, they've got it easy, and yes, it might be true that they might have an easier life now because they're reaping the rewards of the risks, but I'm assuming you probably, if you'd seen her when she was 21 or 22 and she was trying to work all
60,
hours,
70, 80-hour weeks,
yeah, to do all this, you wouldn't be envious, you know. And she took a risk there, and she probably could have got a stable job that didn't have as much risk. So it's really interesting that you say that, because I guess the benefit from taking risks is, I guess for you as well, when you're looking at it, it's probably a lot more worthwhile than the risk, as you say, of losing out on the risks that you take. Because if you've got the mindset that you're always going to back yourself and build yourself up, if you have a fall, then yeah, that's a great mindset to have, and that's something that I'm trying to have more of. And I think my mindset on it comes from maybe my parents. So I don't know if it's a working class thing or a northeast thing of like thinking, trying to go for stability and worrying about something happening in the future that's going to take everything away from you. Like, I don't know, but yeah, before we pause for a moment, I just wonder, I mean, you don't have to go into detail about family, but in terms of your parents or your family growing up, did you observe people taking risks, and did that sort of inspire you, or are you the outlier in your family that you're the only one who takes these sort of risks?
I think it's a real mix, really, in my family. So my dad worked in banking when I was a kid. So he worked for HSBC, or he worked for Midland Bank before it was taken over by HSBC, in their like business banking sector. But then he felt called to be a church minister. So he basically dropped his entire career when I was a kid. We moved to London for 3 years while he studied like theology and stuff like that. And in that time, my mum wasn't working either because she'd stayed at home to look after me and my sister. My dad wasn't earning any income, and we literally lived off friends and family supporting us for like 3 years. So I guess from that point of view, I've seen a big life risk. I don't know if banking is like a transferable skill, or it's not something I know a huge amount about, but that must have been a big risk to take. Other than that, I don't think there's been a huge amount of risk taking in my family. It's more sort of slow and steady type backgrounds where I think generally I'm quite fortunate that I come from quite a middle class family. We live quite a comfortable lifestyle. Yeah, pretty much all my family do, other than maybe my mum's mum, so my grandma on my maternal side, who is retired and just has, I don't think she even gets the full state pension. So she just lives in like an annex with my parents. But other than that, I think I've generally had quite a cushy upbringing. So from that point of view, yeah, I've just been really fortunate with a background, and maybe that's given me space to express that risk, having that stable background.
Yeah. But so the next thing I wanted to chat about, which I found really interesting when I started watching YouTube videos, was just about the career break that you're currently taking. And yeah, I just wondered if you wanted to talk about the career break itself and what prompted your career break.
Yeah, so I'd always kind of had this bit of ambition that it'd be nice to take the occasional like mini retirement, as it were, like 6 months off here and there through my career, just to do nice things, basically, whether that be some kind of extravagant holiday, or whether it was just time to spend in the garden at home, or seeing family a lot over that time period, or some other side project that I wanted to do. And I kind of had this perfect storm of scenarios where I started last year like really positively, was cracking on really well at work. I just like achieved one of these promotions that I was chasing. And then I just started to overwork, basically. So maybe that's a flaw in how I approach things, that when there's a lot of things to do, I try and tackle the biggest one first, because that feels like the biggest achievement to get out of the way. So rather than tick off, lots of small things to build up, I'll just plow head on into the big tasks. So I live about an hour away from where I work, because there's no parking at my work. So I walk in. It's only about 15 minutes quicker to take public transport. So I was getting up at about 6, which is when I get up most days. I was out the door by about 7 in the morning to be in work for 8. And I was regularly not finishing work till sort of 7 p.m. So then by the time I've got home, it's 8. And then I'm just kind of basically eating and going to bed. So I got into this really unhealthy pattern of work, which was great in terms of I was getting so much done, but it just wasn't great for like my personal life.
Yeah.
So, my wife was starting to complain that she was barely seeing me. And to be fair, that was very true. And then I was just absolutely shattered on the weekends because I was putting so much time and effort into work. And so it kind of started to build up to a bit of a head, sort of late summer, really. And I just said to my boss at work, look, I'm going to need to take some time. I've never sort of really struggled with mental health problems before. I started to struggle with just sort of feeling really run. I think it was probably burnt out as much as anything else. I think I'd probably just overdone it for 4 or 5 years, then got into a really bad routine. So I just said, look, I'm going to need some time. And so I originally said, I'm going to take 2 months. So my idea was November, December at the end of 2023, I would take off and then I would start back in the new year. Sort of, it was quite a nice break. I don't know what industry you work in, but in construction, Christmas is quite a nice cut-off point. Loads of people request stuff for Christmas, even though no one's going to look at it over Christmas, and then you come back in the new year, and it's almost like you get almost a bit of a restart in a lot of things.
Right.
So to me, that felt like a good option. And so I actually started posting on YouTube just to keep some structure into what I was doing while I was off, to give me something to concentrate and focus on. But as the time went on, I started thinking more about it and thought, well, actually, maybe this relates a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier about risk early in careers as well. I started thinking, well, actually, maybe I've got an opportunity here where, yeah, I've got myself into a good position in terms of my career and work and that kind of side of things. But maybe I've got an opportunity to either take an extended break or to try something new. And so that I was kind of stewing on that through the first sort of month or so that I was off, and sort of doing these YouTube videos, and I was really enjoying the process. I think because my job is very numbers analytical, there's quite a structured process that you're dealing with authorities and codes and all this kind of stuff. I was really enjoying that creative outlet, and so I just got to the point where I was like, why not just take a career break? Why not? I'll keep posting YouTube videos. If something happens and it starts to do well, I'll kind of approach it as if I'm doing it as a job, and I'll see what happens. And if nothing happens in 3 months' time, I'll probably be starting to look for a new job. But so that was kind of the thinking, and it was nice to have some cash on hand because I had some savings and that kind of side of things where I had invested. I've always kept a little bit of a cash buffer just for emergencies if the boiler exploded or whatever. So there was an opportunity to do that there, and it just felt like a really good chance to do that because I have no dependents. I've got no kids. My wife is in full-time work. Whilst her salary doesn't cover our outgoings as a whole, it's it's a good chunk of it. It's like 2/3 of our outgoings covered. So that just felt like, it almost felt like the stars were aligning for me to say, actually, hang on a minute. I've got an opportunity here. Why not take it, see where it goes? If it doesn't work out, what's my worst case scenario? Is I'm just looking for a new job. I'm in quite a fortunate position as well, where the industry I'm in is so lacking in skills and fresh graduates and new people coming into the industry that I think literally since the new year, we're only 3 or 4 days into the new year, I've had 4 or 5 messages on LinkedIn saying, if you're looking for a job, we've got like places that would love to interview you and stuff like that. So I don't think I would find it hard to find a job. I did at one point go for a couple of like interviews when it was a couple of years back, and I was just sort of testing the waters to see if I was actually being paid a fair wage, and I got offered 2 jobs from 2 interviews. So I think there is demand out there in the area that I live in. I think even though it is in the south of the country, as it were, that kind of potentially more affluent for this industry area, there's just the place where I live is a bit cut off, and so I think they just struggle for generally younger people in the industry. So I think just that alignment of the career break, enjoying a bit of sort of creative YouTube posting, having a little bit of cash behind me to mean that financially it's not the end of the world if I take 4 or 5 months out. Just all kind of felt like an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
No, that's really interesting. And what you mentioned at the start there about always been interested in taking mini breaks or like mini retirements. That's something that I've always thought about, and I always wonder why it's not the norm in any way. Like the norm seems to be right, if the maximum you're going to have off from work in a row is going to be 2 or 3 weeks, and maybe that those lucky people who manage to get 4 weeks off work, maybe I don't know, they've hit a special birthday and they can convince the line manager to give them that extra time off or use the unpaid leave or what have you. But until you retire, you're only going to be away. Like I'm only going to be away from my office desk for 2 weeks at most at a time.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, that just seems such a depressing thought that I'm not gonna have 3 weeks or 4 weeks or, a month away from thinking about work until I'm, 60 odd. And I don't quite understand where that comes from or why that's the culture. And I remember reading something it was when I first started work, to be honest, and I was getting used to the 9 to 5, and I was thinking, "Oh, I'm doing this until I'm 60 odd." I read something, and it was someone who said that I think it might have been an academic who had experienced this, and they said that they think in terms of having a sabbatical every 7 years or having a mini retirement, like a year off every 7 years. And they said for them, the benefit that it helps them with is to not just let life pass them by, because you'll be able to chunk up those 7 years. Each 7 years, when you look back on your life, you can think, right, I worked those 7 years, and then for that one year, what did I do? What new experience did I have? And I've always thought, actually, once I get in a better financial position, I would love to be able to, you know, I think with the fire movement, or it sometimes gets a bit branded with the people wanting to retire when they're 40 and never work again. But I guess for me and you, I guess our vision on it more is we want to have the flexibility to to say no to work when we want to have other more fulfilling experiences in our personal life. Yeah, so that.
Yeah, I think it can be quite unhealthy as well. That kind of fire approach where
Mm,
I do follow some of the kind of forums and stuff online and sort of check in every now and again to see what's kind of what people are talking about, what people are discussing. And it does come up sort of semi regularly where someone has retired and then they've just gone, well, I enjoyed the first 3 months or enjoyed the first six
mm,
months where I suddenly had all this time. And then they realize that, maybe a lot of their connections from a social point of view were people from work
yeah,
and they're missing that environment, or they haven't got some structure in their life to, they're not retiring to something. They're just retiring for the sake of retiring, as it were, because I don't know, maybe they've looked at people in their family or something like that who are a bit older and have worked their whole life and are now sort of enjoying the fruits of that. But they, maybe have something to retire to, whether it be some gardening, whether it's some kind of voluntary type work. And I do enjoy work. I enjoy the challenge of work. I enjoy, the people that you come across in work. Being a civil engineer on smaller private type scale things, there are some people that I would deal with all the time, like in the local highways authority, for example. If we're getting a new junction and we're doing some back and forth discussions with the local highway authority, it's often the same people that you'll deal with. But the
mm,
clients will be different, the sites will be different. There's always a twist, there's always something different about it that keeps you interested. So I don't think I could just get to that, £1 million goal, withdraw 40 grand a year and just do nothing. I think
yeah,
I would go a bit stir crazy. But maybe just circling back on that sort of career break type thing. I think I've maybe always had a different perspective on that slightly because again, touching on what my dad did for work when he became a church minister, it's almost expected that you take career breaks in that.
right.
So it's generally encouraged that, I don't know if it's by chance or what, but 7 years is again the number
Mm,
where they sort of say, after 7 years of ministry, because socially it can be quite taxing. People offload a lot of stuff onto you in that kind of job. You take some time out. So I saw my dad got to do that as well. I can't remember whether it was 7 years in or 8 years in, or it was around that kind of number that he
yeah,
did it. Um, And I think that was just really helpful for him as a bit of a reset, a bit of a
Yeah.
chance just to step back, slow the pace of life down for a little bit before you jump back in. And you would jump back in refreshed and different.
Yeah.
Because I was fortunate enough as well, where beginning of this year, we'd been planning a big holiday, me and my wife, because we got married in COVID, and very annoyingly, the day before we got married, wedding receptions got cancelled and all this kind
Oh,
of stuff,
all
which was
right.
which was interesting.
Mm.
But so we'd always planned that we wanted to do some really nice big holiday. Um, and so I let my line manager know like 6 months in advance that I wanted this like big holiday coming up, told him the dates I was planning, and managed to get 3 weeks off to go on this probably like once in a lifetime type holiday. And that was just great. I came back so refreshed from that
Yeah.
holiday. Whereas sometimes when it's just a week, the first few days you're almost a bit slouched and slobbing because you're
Yeah.
just recovering energy. And then the last few days almost feels like, oh, I'm back at work and on Monday or whatever. And so it feels like you don't actually get that full time to
Mm.
switch off. I think that is important. I think I hadn't really realized the importance of it until I pushed myself too hard at work in terms of hours and
Yeah.
physically, walking 2 hours basically every day to and from work is like there's a physical side to that as well as the mental thinking side that goes on at work, which in itself is quite tiring. I don't think you really realize that until
Mm.
you get into the world of work and you're doing that kind of 9 to 5 type routine, that when you're learning lots of new stuff, it is tiring when you have to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how have your family or friends sort of reacted to the decision to have a career break? Is that something that they've been supportive of, or have you had any sort of difficult conversations about it?
Yeah. So at the beginning, when it was just like 2 months that I was planning off, I think people quite enjoy like I rock up at my grandparents' house and sort of see them and get to spend time with them and spend a lot of time sort of catching up with just family and friends that I feel like I'd neglected.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really good because everyone was quite encouraging about that. Like I'd said, like, I think I'm feeling like burnt out from work and stuff like that. And so people made space for me just to kind of, go to the pub and watch some football on a big screen with a few people, or go into town or just sort of sit and chat. We bought ourselves a little outdoor fire pit this summer, and that's been great fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like a secret like pyromaniac inside of me somewhere, but but that's been great as well. And then when I think I handed in my notice for my job about a week before Christmas, um, and I hadn't really told people that that's what I was going to do at that point. I'd been stewing on it and thinking about it, and so really over that Christmas time when you sort of see a lot of family, that was the first time I like told most of them,
Yeah.
and so most of them were really encouraging. It was quite funny. My nan on my mum's side was like, give you 3 months, you'll be going stir crazy after that. Just because she was like, you need those social connections at
Yeah.
work. And, I think that's fair enough point. I think, you do need those social connections, especially if you're going to be self-employed or working in quite an isolated role. I think you do
Mm.
need that network of people around you. But yeah, generally people have been really encouraging, which has been good. Um, you do get the occasional word where it's like you're doing what? You're just kind of randomly starting like a newsletter and a YouTube channel, and there's a couple of other bits you're trying on the side. Like, what are you doing? You were in a
Yeah.
great career, but yeah, mostly positive. And that's been really helpful, I think. Yeah, and it's encouraging when other people look in on your situation and go, "Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Worth the shot. Go for it. Good luck."
Definitely. And you touched on the fact at the moment that there's a sort of shortfall between your household's income now and what your outgoings are to keep your sort of household afloat. So what is your strategy with that? So are you going to be dipping into your savings and investments, or are you going to be trying to create that extra income to fill that gap?
Yeah, so I am going to be trying to create some income to fill that gap. Um, because it feels like long term that would be great anyway. Um, I do. I hadn't mentioned this earlier as well, but it kind of ties into the initial website story that I kind of rediscovered building websites again after I finished university.
Hmm.
And so I actually had really good success where when I started out of university and was working 9 to 5, I was like, oh, it'd be great to build some like extra income on the side. So I tried, I don't know how much people will know about it, but I tried Amazon FBA. So I was basically buying stuff at like Argos, IKEA, and then flipping it on Amazon for more than I was buying it for.
All
And I was
right.
buying in relative bulk. And I had the whole thing set up where I was paying someone in the Philippines to basically scour websites, and they would basically earn a full-time income because it's so much cheaper to live over there from being like an assistant to me. And so they
Wow.
had this like standard operating procedure that I'd written out, and they were trawling websites and comparing it to Amazon prices, and there were like margins and things I'd like said to them. And so every evening, basically, I would get a list from this person. If they'd found anything with what products they'd found, I would then go and buy them, and I would buy them and ship them to a warehouse. So I would never see the products, and that
Right.
warehouse would then prep them, pack them, and ship them into Amazon for me for the cost of about £1 an item. And so that was really exciting to try and build a business around that. I, I got to the point where I was like, for the effort, it's not that much money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I put that down. But then I started building a website. I won't give too much of it away because I don't own it anymore, but it is still out there on the web. It's kind of a niche gardening subtopic because my friends think I'm old before my time and I enjoy gardening and reading. But I built that up to, it was getting about 35,000 people visiting it a month. It was getting
Wow.
about 300 or 400 US dollars a month from ad revenue and about $600 a month in sales from I wrote a small ebook for it that was just sold on the website as well. So it was bringing in about 1,000 US dollars a month. And then I flipped and sold that. And you can sell websites for like multiples of their monthly revenue.
Mm.
And that's basically where another big chunk of my current
Wow.
investment starting pot came from. It took me a year and a bit to kind of build that up. But there are a few sort of kind of side hustle type things that I'm going to try out. I've started trying out some of them, and I'll probably start talking a bit more about them on the newsletter and on the YouTube channel going forward. Some of them are just literally, I'm swapping some time for money to try and get some money coming in, but some of them are more long term things.
Mm.
So, for example, like the YouTube channel and the newsletter, it's basically documenting my story. But I'd love to build like a community of people who are trying to do something similar. And
Yeah.
when you get to that point, there's so many like win-win scenarios that you can do as a community. So I think it's probably been flogged to death by now, but things like investing apps, a lot of them will give you like a free share if you sign up.
Mm.
Often it's only if you sign up via someone's like shared link. Those are kind of like no-brain offers where if someone has a sign-up link and it's
Yeah.
something you're interested in, you might as well sign up, get £10 worth of free shares. Even if you don't want to use the product, you just sell them and withdraw the money. But it's a win-win. It takes 10 minutes to do. It's a bit like bank switching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can earn a couple of £100 by switching your current account. It doesn't take very long, and it's just it's almost free money that you might as well just take while it's there. So there's great things like that I would love to almost build up like a list for my community where people who are on like the email list can just go, oh yeah, if I can earn 50 quid if I just like sign up to this, or I can do this and just earn a bit of money on the side, and there might be some kind of kickback for me in that.
Yeah.
And usually there's no additional cost to the person who's using that service. So there's things like that I think more long term could provide a little bit of income. But I mean, I feel like you need quite a big community to make those kind of things work. And I'm definitely not there yet with my small little YouTube channel. But I really enjoy when people leave comments on the videos, and it's really encouraging when it's the same people leaving some of those comments, and
Yeah.
that's the start of that community. And I really appreciate those people, and I hope that comes across when I reply to those people if any of them listen to this. But I really appreciate when people sort of get involved and give encouragement, and I'd like like to be able to do something that gives back to those people, but that is a win-win for everyone involved. So that's maybe like a more long-term thing. Some of these short-term things that I'm trying out, I would love to start chatting about when I've got a bit more results to share. There's one that I've done before that I'm going to pick up again that I know works basically, and so we'll bring in like a half decent amount of money each month. I do hold some like ambitions that I'd love to do one day that probably won't ever really bring in any money, but I would just love to do. So one of them is I would love to write a book. I'm not the world's best writer. I'm well aware of that, but I really enjoy reading like fantasy books, for example. I'm like 10 books deep in the Wheel of Time at the moment, and however many thousands of pages that is. But I'd love to write like a fantasy book one day. And I'm involved in a group online called 20 Books to 50K, which if anyone does want to try like self-publishing as an indie author, it's well worth being in that community, because it stems from this I can't remember the original chap who created it, but he basically wrote 20 books and that gives him 50K a year of income. And there's, because New Year's just been, loads of people have been posting their year updates, and there's some crazy numbers in there of people literally doing millions per year from their self-publishing books. I think I read one literally last night, I think, where someone did over 600 grand this year with their book sales, and they're targeting 1 million next year. And it's just, some of the numbers are absolutely crazy, but I'm well aware that my writing skill probably isn't anywhere near scratch where people would want to buy those books, but it's more just a personal ambition, but that might throw off a little bit of money. So there's stuff like that I would love to do one day. That would be interesting. But yeah, short term is I've got about £1,000 a month I need to fill a black hole with. So the sooner I can start bringing in some money, the slower my savings will start to dwindle, which will be good.
And I think the great thing about that, and you mentioned before, your YouTube channel is charting that story, and it gets people going back month after month to see how you're doing with plugging that gap and how it's progressing. And I understand what you mean about when I know on my YouTube, when I get comments back from the same people on each video, you start building up that what feels like your own little community of people, and it's like there's that thing, isn't there, where people say, try and build an audience of like, they might use 1,000, but I'll use 100 for thinking of like of 100 like super fans, like trying to build a community where you don't have millions of people following you, but the people who do follow you religiously. So if you release something, say you had to release, I don't know, a product, a book or whatever, they would always buy that, and if you imagine if you've got maybe 100 people who are really interested in your content, who are going to spend £10, even just a year, say, on that, like whether you release a book a year or some sort of product a year, that's sort of £1,000 a year that you're making just from those. And I think with YouTube and the reach of social media, that 100 people, is possible. So I mean, we've started talking about it now. So what made you start YouTube as a sort of vehicle to do it? I mean, what I'm particularly interested in from you is that the difference between mine and your channel, I guess, at the moment is you've been very brave in that you're on there on video talking to everyone. There's that, I guess there's that chance that someone who, I don't know, you knew from school, who you're not friends with, who's maybe not as supportive of you. I mean, like that's my fear, of someone who I don't really get on with, say, is going to find my channel and like send it around people and go, oh, look what they're doing, like that sort of thing. That's my fear, and that's why I'm not on via video. And I think it's really brave when someone starts a new channel and goes all in and goes on video. So yeah, I just wondered whether you want to talk about starting the channel and if you had any sort of concerns about putting yourself out there.
Yeah, so I think I originally started the channel more as just something to be a creative outlet, something that is a topic that I'm interested in, like personal finance. I think if people knew how much time I spent like reading like financial news articles, forums, watching YouTube videos, they would think I'm wasting my life and quite sad. It's just something I find interesting. And so I thought, well, I've got all this free time on my hands suddenly because I'd taken this sort of 2 month mini break, as it were, at that time. I thought, well, I might as well start something that I can express some of that. And sometimes when you talk through something or write it down, it clarifies your own thoughts as well. And so just by almost putting that goal out there of, I think the first video on the channel was like gonna make £1 million. That's the goal. It it's kind of solidifies that as something I want to do. It almost creates a little bit of pressure to do it because people can suddenly find that video and hold you accountable on the internet, even if you'll never meet them in real life
Yeah.
potentially. Um, so I think that was just a really kind of, yeah, it was almost a creative outlet, but that also would hold me accountable to what I'm
Mm,
trying to achieve. Because otherwise, it's just some kind of like distant goal that kind of
yeah.
hangs out there in the distance. Um, I've forgotten the second part of your question. Sorry.
It was just about being, coming to the decision of putting yourself on video on your YouTube and I guess being vulnerable where people can find you and sort of make judgments on
Yeah,
your journey.
yeah. I think I'm not too worried about negative people arriving. I almost take the opposite spin in that if people I know are finding the videos, when I'd say like 99% of the population has no interest in watching like
Mm,
finance videos on YouTube, then something must be going right because my channel must be reaching a lot of people.
yeah,
So from that point of view, I put a positive spin on it. And I think if it is reaching that many people, there'll be so many more people that are giving positive support than there will be from the negative kind of people that are there on the channel that I almost won't really care. I think
yeah,
if people wanted to, poke fun at me or make nasty comments, it's a little bit sad when people feel the need to do that. But at the same time, I can just block them or remove their comments from YouTube.
yeah,
And
that's true.
there's always the kind of the nuclear option like that if I wanted to. Um, so yeah, I think that is something that I will have to revisit as the channel gets bigger. And thankfully, all the comments I've received so far are immensely positive. Like people within the community who have signed up to the newsletter, which I kind of view as the core of the community. That's where a lot of the more detailed content goes
Yeah,
out to. Um, I've had some people just like hit replies to emails that I've sent out and just gone, really enjoyed this. That's been great. Really enjoy your insight, even if I don't. I had one where it's like, I don't actually agree with your insight there, but I really enjoyed it because it's something I hadn't thought
yeah,
about as a way of approaching that. And I really value that so much more. But inevitably, there's going to be a time when I start getting some of those negative comments. And it will be a new experience for me because I've never really been a big social media user.
mm,
I have like a Facebook account and stuff that I very rarely go on. I didn't sign up to Facebook till I was like 18 or something, and it had been out for like a decade or something by that point.
yeah,
But yeah, so I think it is something that I maybe put a more positive spin on. That it's exciting if people that I know find it because it means my content is reaching lots of people, and hopefully the majority of people will respond positively to it. So I would say that I hate talking to a camera. I've discovered it's so difficult. For some reason, as soon as I'm talking to a camera lens instead of a person, I can barely string a sentence together. I have
yeah,
to chop so many dead silence bits out where
mm,
I'll say like a sentence and then I'm like, what should I say next? Even
yeah,
though I've bullet pointed out like the list of things I want to talk about.
yeah.
But yeah,
I do think when you start making videos or talking on podcasts or what have you, you get a new appreciation for people in the media who present TV shows and things because uh,
yeah,
it's really hard to not. I find it really hard not to use filler words. But if you watch someone
yes,
presenting a radio show or presenting a TV show, you won't hear a filler word because they're so trained in how to speak and how to you know use use the words properly. And I watch them now and I think, wow, you know what? Before I would think, oh, you've got an easy job. Why do you get paid that money? And now I watch it and I think, actually, it's because you know, if you had me on there, people would be turning off because they'd be saying, why they're saying and I think, and you know, so much. So yeah, it is a skill.
Exactly the same realization when I recorded my first video and started to watch it back and was like, kind of like 50% of this content is me going, you know, I think. And I have also picked up certain mannerisms and phrases that I say that I wasn't even aware that I said before. And that's been quite interesting, quite sort of fun to to see.
Yeah, cool. So I'm conscious that we could probably talk for hours because we've both got quite similar interests. And as a bit of a background insight for people who are listening to this, I haven't signed up to the premiere version of Zoom, so we are on a timer for 6 minutes left. So Chaz, is there anything last sort of things you want to talk about before we finish off? Any burning questions you've got for me? I know we're planned that maybe we'll do something on your channel in maybe a month's time, and I'll go in the hot seat and you can ask some questions. But yeah, before then, anything from you that you want to discuss?
I don't think there's anything I particularly wanted to discuss extra. I think I appreciate being invited on as the guinea pig really for your new format. I'm a big podcast consumer. I love where I had this kind of 2 hour walking time basically to and from work. I love shoving in a podcast in my ears, and for my sins, I listen to podcasts on 2x speed as well, as I do with a lot of things, which just helps me consume way more content than I would do otherwise. And I only really slow it down if it's like a complex topic that I need the time to think about. But I really enjoyed this format, and I might have to steal it one day and just try and like get some people on, because that's one of the things I've set myself as a goal this year. Is I'd love to do some collaborations with people. And it's been great just to chat to you as well, just on a different platform, where on YouTube you get those edited 5, 10, 15-minute snippets where someone is trying to portray some information to you, but you don't really get a chance to have that feel for, you know, what they're like personally as a person. Would you be friends with them? Would you just have a chat with them? That kind of side of things. And I think the podcast format is just so much nicer for that. And it's just, I've really enjoyed the chat. I think we clearly have a lot of things that we could ramble on about together. And I'm looking forward to sort of setting up the reverse version and getting you on. We'll have to try and find a way where we can record longer than 40 minutes, because that looks like we need to find something longer.
I know, and I might it might be something where I just have to bite the, if I'm doing more of these, maybe I'll have to bite the bullet and pay for the premiere version of it. I think it's £12 a month, but while I'm in the testing guinea pig phase, I haven't I've done the money savvy thing and not committed to it yet.
Right before you buy.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, thanks for agreeing to chat. And you are the risk on investor. You're on YouTube. You've got a website. You don't have an Instagram, I don't think. Is that right?
Yeah, I've actually never used Instagram. So
what I would say, if you ever wanted to create one, do create one, because in organizing this chat, I didn't realize at first that YouTube deletes the comments where you put in your email information. So I kept leaving a comment and it was a few days later that I realized my comment had disappeared. And because I couldn't find you on Instagram, it was hard to sort of contact you. So it would have been easy if you had an Instagram, but I appreciate that not everyone likes Instagram or uses it.
Maybe I need a contact me button on my website, because I literally just basically only people who are signed up to the email list will have my email address, but they can always just hit reply, and that's how you got to me in the end, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I broke through the barriers.
I had to do some sleuthing and thinking, how can I contact? And I thought, I'll sign up for the newsletter and then reply. That must be the way. Great. No, well, I've really enjoyed this chat. And yeah, thanks everyone. If you've made it to the end of this chat, do leave a comment in the box down below. I like reading what people's thoughts are on the topics that we've discussed, if anything's resonated with you. And I'm hoping to do more of these discussions in the future. So if you are interested in being on a future chat, then do drop me a message on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to contact me, and I'll set something up. And yeah, I'll see you on the next video, and I'll leave Chaz's links in the description box down below. Thanks.